Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Intracultural podcast. I'm Missy.
And I'm Lucy, and we're two anthropologists that co founded the firm Willing Observers, and we focus on DEIB and culture in particular.
And this podcast covers a range of topics and answers common questions that can be better understood using the concept of culture. The Intracultural podcast is sponsored by us. So I'm sure there will be some really great advertising interlude.
We do a certificate and a certification. So if you're interested in learning more and become more proficient in DEIB, whether that's to help you in your career development or in your current profession, it's a really updated course where we're talking about and applying all the changes of DEI landscape into the program. And essentially, the goal is that by the end, you'll get a certificate or a certification so you can learn how to create more inclusive cultures in your department, organization, university, you name it. And the main difference between the two programs is that one of them is gives you the foundations and the concepts, and the other one we help you develop your own strategic plan. And there's additional more resources in a toolkit that comes with that. And what else? Let's say anything else I forgot about the programs, Missy?
No, you did a great commercial interlude though. So we don't need it's like we should have introduced it like the Intercultural Podcast, sponsored by ICS. I like it.
And I did not script that. That just came out of my head like that. So maybe I should go into marketing
There
and
you
yeah.
go.
Well, let's see. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a 50% discount, a permanent discount for anyone that's been unemployed because of the Trump budget cuts. That no, because of Trump's anti-DEI executive orders. So
Because of Trump's existence. If you are unemployed because of Trump's existence, although that would probably extend further now that we've had tariff week. So
that is totally fine. Come get a 50% discount. We support you no matter what discipline you're in.
but yes, it's sponsored by us. Hmm. So how are you, Lucy?
I'm doing well. If someone is watches the videos, it's almost like I'm in a different place every time. I am now in LA visiting my sister, and I am drinking a matcha lemonade.
Excellent.
And what else happened?
That's it. And that's all. There's just matcha lemonade and LA.
The last week has been a blur. Oh, yes, I went on vacation with my family. That's why I don't remember anything. Everything is gone out of my brain. We were in Palm Desert for a week, and I was with one of my sisters. They have like a timeshare resort thing. So it was a lot of pool and writing. So it was nice.
Good.
And today we had meetings all day long. So back to reality, it is.
Mhm. Welcome, welcome. Oh yeah. I just downed a bunch of matcha. So I had a matcha spritzer.
Oh,
Um
that sounds really good. How do you make that?
so we have a local coffee shop that we love. It's locally owned. The owner is very nice. We met him a few months ago. But they use matcha and tonic. Um, and they make an in-house strawberry mint syrup, and then they put dried strawberries in it.
That sounds so good. Please, can I have that when I visit you next? That sounds
Mhm.
amazing. Okay.
Yes. They do not sponsor the podcast, so I won't mention coffee shop.
But if you want to sponsor us and you know who you are,
Then let me know. And we can definitely, I mean, I will sip your coffee the whole time. No problem.
I love that. Okay, so on to more sad, somber, and depressing news.
Yes. Woo. Today our topic deals with something that I'm sure has been in the headlines. It's always in the headlines, really, but has really been in the headlines since, January and during the campaign last year. So today we're going to talk about immigration. And we always try to answer a question. So today we're going to kind of grapple with the question of, is immigration a DEI issue?
hmm And usually these two topics are not really thought about as coinciding or coming together, which is, even to us, when we had a conversation with our podcast team and we're brainstorming topics on what to talk about, everyone in our team has been following the news and deeply concerned about immigration. And I just kind of flippantly asked, is immigration a DEI topic? And everyone's like, yes. And if you follow our podcast and you know a little bit of my background and my background and training is both anthropology, but also very standard DEIB best practices. That's how I got trained into the industry. And immigration is hardly part of a best practice approach, but it comes up as part of the conversations and as part of the topics when we talk about what can we do to make people's lives better? What can we do to make people feel sure that people at work feel safe and like they belong? And so there's no way we cannot do an episode on immigration.
Yeah. And I think too, if you are in the United States and following the news about the United States around what's happening with immigration right now, part of we're going to touch on, of course, the issue of just the blatant dehumanization of other people. But on the labor side of things, too, a lot of the headlines have been around how what is happening with immigration in the United States impacts the labor market, impacts workplaces, impacts everything about the economy and how we work and how we think about being at work. So to separate the two is seems very silly. And so
hmm
let's bring them back together.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk a little bit about what we mean by these things have been separated first, because,
Yeah.
historically DEI, and we've done some episodes where we really look at the history and the rise of the industry, but it's been mostly focused on white collar workers and workers who have already been here, and there's an assumed legal status behind them, right? If you are working at a corporation, the assumption is that you have legal status that grants you employment authorization for you to be there. So, other than at my previous place where I was an in-house DEI person, there was a person who was in charge of immigration. And so there was an immigration specialist, but that was a completely separate type of the work. But part of when I was there was how can we work together and how do we ensure that there's belonging for everyone that comes from a different country to work in the United States. So there are overlaps, but that needed to be bridged intentionally, because the best practices don't really give us much to go off in terms of what do you do to make people that are immigrants included, especially because they're assumed to already have status. And what's been on the news everywhere is supposedly the deportation of people that don't have status, even though that's not actually how it's been playing out. And even if that were to be the only people that are getting deported, there's still a lot of concerns around human rights violations. So I just want to say a little bit about that's not really traditionally a DEI topic, but we think it should be.
Absolutely. And maybe we can start at like the businessy impacts, and because I think we'll probably and then wrap up on the bigger impacts of dehumanization for everyone. But like in like hewing closer to the kind of DEI best practices and like the white collar kind of literature, the there are huge business impacts, right? When you don't have that person that's there that is like bringing in people on certain visas and that they have and legal status, and that becomes a problem for those white collar businesses too. I was reading an article last week about people that are working in hospitals that have very specific kind of training in like neurology and neurobiology, who are basically leaving, right? Who either like leaving themselves or are leaving because they're afraid that something's going to happen to them. And so students in R1 universities, like that are doing research, they're either leaving or being directly targeted. And then people in those white collar industries. So even though you have this history of having people at universities and in these white collar businesses that are helping people with their visas and their citizenship status, that has basically crumbled or is changing very rapidly, and that's changing the makeup of what's happening in these businesses too. And that costs money, right? That is like turnover, that's retention, and it costs all of us if we don't have, people in these industries that are, I don't know, studying like brain cancer. Like that seems really important. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we bring up a really good point that we just kind of jumped into, which is a lot of people in the immigration news focus only on the immigrants that are, quote unquote illegal, that are coming for low paying jobs, that are coming from Mexico in particular. And, if you've heard previous podcasts, I am of Mexican ancestry. I have a mixed status family. So even though that's been the Trump rhetoric around who and why these immigration changes are being done, that's not actually what's playing out in real life, right? That it is, that targeted of brown people and painted them as criminals is being used to incite this huge backlash against people in general, and being used to make these kinds of changes that we're not even hearing about that you mentioned, which is changes in status for people also. So it's not just targeting people who are here undocumented, it's also changing the legal status of people that came here, quote unquote, the right way. So there's a lot of, justification of these huge, I would call them fascist immigration policies that supposedly are only targeting undocumented people. But as you mentioned, the legal status of people are changing, even if they did things the right way. So, for example, most recently, there was a change to TPS for people from Haiti. So people from Haiti that were here on a TPS, temporary protective the kind of order or visa, they now either have their TPS being shortened or they're going to be asked to leave soon. And we hear a lot of things about people who already are here on visas that they should be worried about whether their visas are getting renewed or just being taken away. And people are concerned about a lot of things. So, from the business perspective, as you were mentioning, that's a huge cost to employers. From the human perspective, that's a huge loss for families. A lot of people are going to have to be separated from their families or worried about what's going to happen to their families. There's a national grieving around like family separation, and no one is safe, right? No one is safe. This is, as we can talk about a little bit about how the 14th Amendment is being challenged. So there's a lot of chaos around in the immigration realm right now. And to your point, it's going to affect everyone, including those people who, as you mentioned, are helping our industry succeed in different ways. So,
In different ways. Yeah,
mhm.
and I went straight for white collar just for thinking about like, you know, what is where we think about DEI often, and this is not correct, right? But where we think about DEI being housed in these white collar spaces that like, that there is a lot of upheaval around quote unquote legal visa holders, like people who have legal status. And the TPS policy that you mentioned is that one is particularly egregious around what's happening in Haiti,
Mhm.
which is we can link you to that, but like because Haiti is very, very tumultuous right now, and sending people back into that space is really problematic, especially given our role in the destabilization historically, which is a whole nother podcast, right? But yeah.
Mhm.
So that's like thinking about those industries. And then But this destabilizes the entire economy, no matter, and like the entire society, no matter where you're at in the system. I don't know, like you're in LA right now, Lucy, but like what has I've already seen like areas just driving around where there's usually like stands and street corner vendors and like they're just gone. They're just
Yeah.
gone. They are not there.
So I was in LA while the order was given by Trump that they were going to send Marines to stabilize the protesters.
Hmm.
And then I left and I came back for some time. And while I was gone, one of the huge incidences that were portrayed in the media in Paramount is literally 2 streets away from where my sister lives. So my family was like directly impacted by the protest and the aftermath of the protest and the all the police that were sent in and all the Marines that were sent in. And so we were following the news really carefully. And that's also brings another layer of what the hell is going on, not just for immigrants, but for all of us. Right. So I was born in the United States. I'm an American citizen. And so there's been a lot of rhetoric from the Trump administration about taking away birthright citizenship and also rulings on that. And about more recently, whether they can take away national, citizenship for Americans that are binational,
Hmm.
which a lot of Mexicans are. And the other thing about LA is that the Trump administration could just deploy Marines to without authorization from the governor, without authorization from Newsom, who said, no, don't bring those in. And he did it anyway. And the court said that he could do that. And it wasn't just arrest of undocumented people that ICE did. ICE was and probably still going to grocery stores, to parks, to schools, to any place of congregation, and arresting people indiscriminatorily
Yeah.
of their status. They were racially profiling individuals, snatching them up, and people literally lost family members. We heard from people that we know that someone lost one of their kids who was 18 years old at a protest, a citizen, and he was rounded up by ICE. And while I was here in Newsom put out in a speech as well that citizens are being rounded up, non-citizens, people who just look like they might be undocumented. And it's kind of, they've been taking an approach of take people now, ask questions later,
Yeah.
which is a huge violation of our civil rights.
Yeah.
So everyone should be scared. Not like this affects every single person in the United States, whether you know people that are undocumented or not.
Yeah. And there's also, just tales of, and these are reported out, right? Like that people that are simply trying to be good allies and good bystanders and who are trying to record what's happening so that there is a recording of it, they too are being taken. And there have been a lot of kind of trumped up charges when those people are taken illegally because you're allowed to record what cops are doing. That they're claiming that they assaulted the ICE officers. So this does have an impact on everyone, like whether we're talking about just the functioning of daily life in a place where you have economies and
Yeah.
people show up and do things in this larger economic system, from your neurobiologist to like, the people that are working in a kitchen, like all ends of the spectrum. There are people that are not going to be going to work, and there are going to be people that are being taken away from their family, out of the economy and away from their family, because of this kind of targeting and profiling. And yeah, we're all impacted to different degrees in different ways because of the policies that are ongoing.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify to clear up misconceptions that are going on, especially when it comes to LA. The protests that were happening in LA were a result of these targeted racial profilings and snatching of people. That is why people were so upset, because you can't just violate civil liberties and not expect people to get upset about it. So uh, that was one of the big moments that incited that, was that immigration had taken a lot of people and had kept them in the basement of a building without access to food, without access to the bathroom, without access to representation, and violating their civil rights. And the mayor and the governor were not asked for permission to do any of these things. This is just the Trump administration doing things on their own accord. So, according to the mayor of LA, she didn't even know that they were going to show up, right? She was surprised that they
Yeah.
were here. And she said, expect them to stay here because they're not telling us anything.
Yeah.
So that they're just acting on their own accord without any coordination at all with LA, which is supposed to be a sanctuary city.
Yeah.
And
And
that's one of the reasons why Trump is targeting LA.
mhm. And I think with the mayor too, Karen Bass, she's has been very good with actively working with this administration on other things because, we had the fires early on in this presidency, and she's been working very carefully to make sure that we're getting federal money to rebuild parts of LA. And she has been doing her legal duty as mayor to at least like comply with what ICE is asking of her. But she's not a very tall person, and I saw a video of her like out in like her like pastel pantsuit, like yelling because there was a tank in MacArthur Park, and I was like, all right, Karen Bass, you do that, right? But it's clear that the governor of the state and the mayor of the city are like not being informed of what is happening, which is not how this usually works in terms of like how ICE enters into a space, right? They're coming in, they're, as you said, snatching people up. There are no warrants that are being issued because that is legally how this happens. There is no targeting of people who are quote unquote criminals. They are just picking people up.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how we can emphasize that enough. Plenty of people have been taken without any just cause or any read of their rights at all,
Hmm.
which is horrifying, again, for everyone. And so it makes me think, going back to the question, is immigration a DEI issue? It's a huge part of the equity component, because as we've done a lot of work and reiterating this, you can't separate people's lives from work. You can't expect people to just leave all of that outside of their place of work and then show up to work in a way where they feel safe, whether they have status or not. Right. So it could be for employers. It could be employers that, employers have a legal duty to check the legal status of every individual. So from the employer perspective, they might think that they're only hiring people with legal status, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people are okay. That doesn't mean that they feel that there's psychological safety at work when it comes to dealing with immigration issues. And that definitely doesn't mean that their families are okay. There's so many people, if not, I would say the norm is that there's not entire families of exclusively undocumented people. It is more likely the case that there's mixed status families, meaning that the kids might have citizenship and the parents might not, or a combination of that. And that means that even if you are sure 100% that everyone in your work is legally allowed to work there, it doesn't mean, to your point, Missy, that they're always going to be allowed to work there. They could be worried about their visa status, and they could be worried about their families who might disappear, literally disappear at any moment. That's
Yep.
horrifying.
It is horrifying. And that's like thinking about, your responsibilities as an employer and as a DEI professional is like making sure that even if this isn't in the best practices literature, like this is like you need to address this as a DEI issue. And then let's just like go. You also need to address this as a human rights issue because, like, remember the baseline of DEI is like compliance with basic civil rights and basic human rights. And so I don't think that we can avoid or should avoid having the conversation about how this is a human rights issue and a human rights crisis, especially not only are people being grabbed off the street, but as Lucy alluded to, the conditions in which people are being kept and held, not just without their legal rights to due process and without their human rights, right, to like food, water, bathrooms. But if they're being held in Florida, they're being held with the express kind of focus on the fact that they could easily be killed and we should all just, I guess, laugh about it. So,
I had thoughts and then I lost them when you said Florida.
yeah, that Florida does that. Florida kind of does that.
Freaking alligator Alcatraz. Oh my God. Oh, yes. Actually, it's connected to that. Well, I did not intend for you to connect it that way. But in thinking about accountability, there was this come up every once in a while from an employer perspective is to what extent can employers or managers hold their employees accountable for the social media posts that they put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And tying it to alligator Alcatraz, actually, it has been disgusting how so many people have gone on social media to just say really dehumanizing things. Like, I hope they die. I hope an alligator chews them up. I hope that that they get drowned with the storms. How the amount of vile comments I have seen on those comments about alligator Alcatraz is just absolutely scary. We're living in a moment where our pre-genocide, like in the kind of social moment that we're living in, where dehumanization is happening at these large societal scales, should be a really big red flag for all of us who are in the activist space. And one of the social media posts that I saw actually was someone who said that, he was Jewish. He lived his whole life. He's older now. And he said that growing up, his parents always thought that the US was going to become like Nazi Germany. And so his parents always said that they always carried a passport with them because they were terrified of getting deported from the United States, and that they always lived in under vigilance, hypervigilance, because of their experiences in Nazi Germany. And so he made a social media post about it and said, this is eerily similar to what my family went through and what they would talk about when we were kids. And he said, if the Republican Party and Trump wins the midterms, he is gone. He's like, there's no coming back from this. It's getting worse. So he gave a really interesting warning that said in these next 2 years is going to really define where we're headed as a country. And
Yeah.
people should not take it lightly.
No, and I think that's like, the connection and thinking about like dehumanizing rhetoric is like there's a great series of studies about like online hate speech and dehumanizing rhetoric that comes out of, I want to say the UCLA Free Speech Center, but I'll find the exact series of research. But it's, dehumanizing rhetoric is an issue when it becomes normalized because it doesn't stay in social media space and it like there's always this idea that words and actions are somehow separate. But the more that you see hate speech and dehumanizing speech about a particular group of people, the you usually see a parallel increase in violence, actual physical violence against those same people. So those two things are not separate. And the other thing that is happening, since we mentioned alligator Alcatraz, is that that dehumanizing rhetoric is coming from the most powerful people in the country who have escalated that rhetoric not through physical violence, but through the material implementation of the kinds of structures that create those violence, like a prison where people have no food or water or bathrooms and where they can be eaten by an alligator and we laugh about it. So the rhetoric itself is problematic because it cannot be disconnected from those two really important things.
And on that point, it's getting worse, right? If we're connecting all of these things together, it's not just the rhetoric, it's the fact that they're following through on that rhetoric in really material ways. So most recently, alligator Alcatraz, and we didn't actually say what that was for people that have not heard of it, but it's supposed to be supposedly a detention center that is on the way to getting people deported. So it was like made in something like 6 to 8 days. I forget how long it took them to make it and plug in the batteries and supposedly provide basic needs resources. By the way, no Democrat is allowed to go anywhere near it. God forbid that they're going to take photos and expose what's actually going on. And to your point, they were when they were talking about it, when the Trump administration is talking about it, they're literally making fun of people potentially dying there who
Mhm.
are probably very realistically going to die there. So the escalation of now you have alligator Alcatraz, and then just a few weeks ago we had the LA violence and the U.S. Marine deployed being there, and the governors being ignored, and their authorities being sidestepped. So this is not just rhetoric. We're seeing an escalation of their strategy being implemented.
Yeah. And this is also, we're focusing on this moment because this moment is important and we're calling it an escalation because we're not ignoring the like recent history in the United States of dehumanization and like horrible immigration policy that has really been put forth since the Clinton administration. Every presidential administration, Republican or Democrat, has amped up, right, the horrors from the previous administration, not creating pathways to citizenship, like walking back, quote unquote, legal routes, creating more private detention facilities and private prisons, and only rolling things back, some of them when they get caught, when it comes to the public attention. So we are not in any way letting those folks off the hook, but at
Mm-mm.
the same time, pointing out how this moment is somehow even worse right, than the bad things that have been happening for the past, however many years under different presidential administrations.
Oh, yeah. And let's not ignore, we're talking a lot about Mexican immigration because that's been the focus, but there's been a lot of targeted immigrant, attacks on Muslims, on people who are just brown, who are not from the United States. So this is part of all of that, concerted strategy against brown and Black people,
Yep.
the undesirables
Yep.
that are unwanted in the United States. And right now, it's been really interesting because we're talking about those more white collar visas. So we're thinking here, we thinking H-1B visas. And I forgot to mention earlier, but as I'm from LA, but I lived in San Diego. And in San Diego, there's huge immigrant populations that come from India to work in tech, and as well as in the Bay Area and as well as in New York. And it's really interesting to see those populations split on the immigration policies because you have Indian immigrants who came here on H-1 visa who did things the right way, right? In quotations, the right way, who are supportive of Trump policies because they think only the undocumented people are getting deported. And then you have the other contingent of that who are like, we're next.
Mhm.
So this is when I'm talking about the undesirables, I do mean all the brown and black people that come from the undesirable countries. So don't think just because you're currently in a protected status that you're going to stay that way. That's been the biggest mistake we have made in history.
Yeah. And I think, this is just to kind of really kind of like round up some of the issues like around the civil rights violations too and the legal protections that are being walked back to. Right? We're supposed to have protections from discrimination based on national origin. We're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to, right? And that's how, Lucy and I were talking earlier, and like that's how the travel bans in Trump's first administration were walked back. The new travel bans, this is also how they're being challenged, but that doesn't necessarily help us with the way that federal immigration policy is being implemented and funded by the representatives that you should vote out of office definitely in the next term. But that's something to just to note. We do are supposed to have discrimination protections based on national origin, and some companies also emphasize discrimination protections based on citizenship status. Um, the other kinds of legal things to note just as a roundup, the legal programs like TPS being completely rolled back, like, the country makes a promise to you about a pathway to citizenship and a pathway to legal resettlement, and then pulls the rug out from under you. And what kind of, promise is that for bringing people into the United States? It's ridiculous. The same with the visa and the visa changes. Um, Deportations to random countries are now both increasing and justified by the Supreme Court, which is a problem for due process. There's all kinds of problems for due process. Um, Simply the idea of changing the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment has a clause called the Citizenship Clause, right? And so, based on the Supreme Court's recent rulings, it seems like there'll be challenges state by state. So we'll, stay tuned in the next 30 days to see what happens there. And asylum claims are harder to make. So I think that's a pretty decent roundup of some of the things that are changing, but they're changing in real time. And I think it's important to see how many different kinds of legal avenues and challenges are being like right now broken down and like um ignored in some
Yeah.
cases, that also show how in the past you had a pathway that was not very good around immigration policy and legal policy, but right now it's just being completely thrown out the window.
Yeah, and I really hate one, thank you for doing a quick roundup, and I really hate having to use the rhetoric of if you don't care about them, they're coming after you next. That's a really intense scare tactic, but we should just care because we are humans and we should have empathy. And we should have, as DEI advocates, we do care about these issues, even if they don't directly affect us. And I think anyone that's gone into the DEI space, I would like to think that they have that source of empathy for other human beings who are being directly targeted. So if you, and Missy does great allyship trainings, if you are an ally, this is a really good way to get involved and to use your legally protected status to help other people. And the at the core of this, is immigration a DEI issue, is if this ramps up and gets worse and worse and worse, not only will we not have DEI, we won't have anyone that doesn't look quote unquote American. So at the core, immigration is definitely a DEI issue because we wouldn't have DEI if it weren't for immigrants coming into this country and making us all be different. So
Yep.
I don't know
Absolutely.
how else it can be a DEI issue.
Yeah. And I think we hit on that. And if you are a DEI professional and need to make the argument, hopefully we've given you also, like, if you do need to make the argument so that you can get this on to kind of the radar of people in your own workplaces, then hopefully we've also given you a few of the tools so that you can make that argument about DEI and about immigration as a DEI issue. So, um, we're gonna wrap there.
Yeah, that was a lot, everyone. Thank you for having so much information thrown at you. I'm sure you weren't sure what to expect, but you got it.
You got it. So, if you need some red cards and you don't know what those are, they'll also be linked in the show notes, and we will be back in your ear soon.
Yeah, and let us know if any of these things sparked an interest and you want to hear more about it. We're happy to do a separate episode on that. So just let us know. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for listening.
everyone. And I'm waving as if you can see me. Bye.
Bye.